Um, and I'm going to get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Danielle Aguas, and I'm the VP of Client Engagement at Center for Executive Excellence. And I'm joined here today by the founder of Center for Executive Excellence, Sheri Nasim, and her husband, Naseer Nasim. In this webinar, Sheri will interview Naseer on the subject of the day after plan, how to prepare your team for what's next now. So we're excited that you're joining us virtually today, and we welcome you. Just some background on Naseer. He is a values-based Fortune 500 executive who leads change through collaboration and big picture thinking. Naseer is known in the fintech sector as a turnaround leader who excels at mobilizing and motivating cross-functional teams to challenge the status quo and drive performance. He's a dynamic, common sense leader with over 27 years of leadership experience working with public, private, and PE-owned organizations, serving as board member, CEO, president, senior vice president of sales, and CIO, which I believe is Chief Information Officer.
That's correct.
He currently serves as the founder of U.S. Financial Relief, a financial services company focused on debt resettlement and restructuring that helps Americans in their time of financial hardship with education and individualized service. Naseer is currently managing his company and caring for his employees from the home he shares with his wife, Sheri, and their German Shepherd, Zoe. And I love Zoe. I miss her, by the way. Some quick housekeeping before we get started. We are recording today's webinar, and we'll share the recording with anyone who's registered, so be on the lookout for that. I also want to mention that we are using Zoom's webinar feature to host today's event. So you'll be on mute and your video is turned off as a participant. Only myself, Sheri, and Naseer have the ability to have video and mics turned on. You'll notice that you have a Q&A button on your screen's dashboard. So we ask that you ask questions throughout the webinar. We often get questions towards the end of the webinar and then we run out of time. So we encourage you to just ask your questions as they come up during the webinar, and then I will do my best to ask Naseer some of those questions at the end as time will allow. Otherwise, we'll be sure to end no later than 12 noon Pacific time, so you can all get back, as I always say, to your regularly scheduled program. So with that, here's Sheri.
Oh, thank you, Danielle. And thank you to each and every participant in today's webinar. I'm so excited to be able to have this opportunity to talk to our guest today and my husband, Naseer Nasim. Thank you for joining us today, honey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Danielle gave us some impressive background about your bio, but I want to spend this time digging a bit deeper and talking about it, what it was like to build that career from the behind the scenes look as a leader, and get your insight about what leaders need to do today to prepare themselves and their teams for what's next. So first, I just want to let everybody know that we're actually in the same house. We're each joining a webinar from our own home offices here in San Diego. So we're alone together. This is actually a rare opportunity because as a turnaround CEO, as many of you know, Naseer not only works out of the house, but he has worked out of the state for a lot of his career. So I've held the fort down here in San Diego and dropped him off at the airport on a Monday and picked him up on a Thursday night or Friday evening. And we have been dating every weekend for many years. And so this is just a really rare opportunity to have him here and to capture some of his insight about taking advantage of this time to have a conversation that might help others during this time. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'm going to start at the beginning, our beginning. In the summer of 1999, I was working in the seaside town of Coos Bay on the on the southern coast of Oregon. I'd been working at a law firm for nearly 5 years there, And when the senior partner of that law firm retired, I decided to step away from the legal field for a bit. And at the same time, you'd been recruited by the CEO of Security Bank Holding Company in Coos Bay, that town, as the Chief Information Officer, or the CIO, as Danielle said. And you were building a team to help you make some significant changes there. So can you please tell us what a holding company is, briefly, and what the business model was that you were recruited to implement there?
I'll be happy to. First of all, thanks for everybody, all of our friends and colleagues joining this call. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. So about that opportunity, Security Bank Holding Company was about $750 million bank holding company, multi-bank holding company. There was a group of about close 25 people that were on the organization leadership that managed about 11 different community banks with the philosophy that you cannot fake community. And so therefore, our goal was to go to different communities and get local businesses to co-invest with us to open a community bank in their area. During that period of time, I believe there was about 3.5 years that I worked there. We opened about 7 de novo banks, and at the same time managed another 4 already established banks, and for a total of about 11 organization, 2 mortgage businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great opportunity to look at that business and look at the opportunities that existed to bring a new business model in that market. Chuck Brummel, who's a good friend of ours still. I love him to death. He's a great guy who recruited me in that organization. When he and I talked, and I simply during that interview looked at him, I said, "Why are you doing this?" And he did not expect a person to come in just kind of question the wisdom behind creating all of these community banks would stand alone everything rather than scaling it and taking advantage of economies of scale that was available to them through technology. And just kind of brings me to where we are today. We can look at challenges and then we can do so much more with it. And that's where the opportunity came there with Security Bank Holding Company.
Thank you. So when we started working together in August of '99, you already had a lot on your plate. In addition to the business model change, the world was about to go through the change from the 20th to the 21st century. You were in charge of ensuring that the company would get through the Y2K bug at the end of the year. That was a major challenge. Can you just quickly tell us what the Y2K scare bug was for those of us?
That's actually a very interesting question to ask right now, because there was so much fear around Y2K. And at the same time, everybody that is a bank or a credit union that's joining this call right now understand that they had their business continuity model to the T ready in case something happened. Spend lots of time, money, and resources to make sure that they are prepared. The difference between that and a pandemic right now, at least Y2K was man-made and had a fixed amount of time that could be addressed. Pandemic is a little bit nebulous, and you don't know what the end is and what the different phases that you're going through. So it requires different level of preparation. But right now, for that time, for Y2K, it was real, and there was a lot of prep work that had to go behind it. Mm-hmm. And just to make sure to make it non-event. And so as leaders, when we get ready for things, to make sure we're prepared for the worst case scenario and for hopes that it will never happen, and spend all the money and resources and allocate energy behind it and get our teams ready. And that's the whole purpose of disaster recovery. Business continuity. You plan for the worst and you make sure that it'll never happen, and assign and allocate resources to make sure, but if it does, that you're effectively minimizing risk, minimizing impact, and helping your organization through those crises.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for explaining that. on top of Y2K coming just around the corner and you being the new kid, if you will, an import from Southern California into this small town of Coos Bay, Oregon, I think the data center had just gotten its results from the SAS 70 audit by a third party, which was below optimal. So you had to start instituting major policy and procedure changes to get that rating up before the audit was performed again in, I assume, 2000. On top of that, you inherited these circumstances as an outsider who had to move quickly, but you couldn't do it by yourself. You had to convince employees to change their work habits, to implement these policies and procedures. It couldn't be something that you just put in a binder and pulled off the shelf when the auditors came. You had to inspire them with a vision to work together and make it into the 21st century, pass that SAS 70 audit, and then change the business model from a cost center to a profit center, which we haven't even talked about yet. And that's just the employees that you had to deal with. You also had to convince the presidents and boards of those affiliated community banks to pay the company that you spun off from a department at Security Bank Holding Company into a standalone company that was called Alliance Technology. And on top of that, you insisted that the construction plans for Alliance Technology building in Portland include bolting the large data servers to the walls in case of an earthquake. And a lot of people laughed at that idea and joked that earthquakes were a California thing. You're in Oregon now and spending money unnecessarily. So why did you insist on preparing the company for disaster that had very little chance of happening?
Well, there was a lot going on, and now looking back at it, the way you summarize it actually just kind of takes me back as to how many things we had to, how many balls were up in the air.
Yeah.
And Chuck, the CEO of the holding company, always told me that you normally have about 20 balls in the air, and somehow you magically make sure that none of them falls. And but that's just kind of a part of the personality, I guess, or the curse, I don't know which one. But it was, the idea was, first of all, going into that environment, we from a stakeholder perspective, it was to the benefit of the company, employees, and the shareholders, and also affiliate companies, to leverage economies of scale, lower the cost, improve the margins, and improve efficiency and performance. Mm-hmm. So although it was a tough discussion to have in a community organization where, people are, fearful of the unknown future and fearful of change overall, and being able to paint a vision for them and share that vision and get them to buy into that vision. As leaders, that's what we need to do. That's what we are born to do. That's what we should do, because you cannot, the only way you can lead is if you step up and let others to lead as well. Mm-hmm. And share your leadership and communicate effectively, but at the same time making sure that you are authentic in your communication. And when you don't have the answers, people know that you're giving your best effort, and they participate with you to make sure to find the right solution. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot going on. We had more equipment than Federal Reserve Bank of Oregon did in terms of, I had about 67 employees at that point. And if you look at, the operation and everything that we were handling, all the distributed processes that we had in terms of manual processes, not even automated, it was all over the place. And there was tons of efficiencies to be gained. And doing those analysis, it would just kind of made, sense for us to conclude that we need to bring everything together. Mm-hmm. Not only doing that, then building a data center, which I had experience in the data center coming in from a computer science perspective, and also past experience. Looking at the data center as to what's required and what's needed and what's necessary and what's optional, building the data center to be a state-of-the-art data center, closer to fiber line, closer to transportation, closer to the Federal Reserve, for, from proof to checks to data processing to imaging to online banking to everything else that we offer to the 11 banks, and now going as an independent company and offering services to everybody else. That
Offering
is,
services, but having them pay for what they were getting for.
that's right. It required us to make sure that we don't take shortcuts in our approach,
Yeah.
and really create a stable environment, a data center that really made sense. And at that point, it was a state-of-the-art type of data center that we built.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, when I was talking about, how, where are some additional expenses that need to be, that's important, not really, optional, especially earthquake proofing, some of the racks that were on wheels, and bolting it on the walls or on the ground. It become, it was a tough sell to make, but nonetheless, I think I was proven right at some point, I guess.
Yes, you were. So the building went up. You successfully relocated about 70 Coos Bay employees to Portland, which was about 300 miles away. I said, there's no way these people are going to follow you, and they did. So you're right on that one. I stayed back at the headquarters in Coos Bay, but I worked as a liaison for you when you had board meetings and leadership meetings, that sort of thing. And on the morning of February 28th, 2001, we were on a conference call with the leadership team, and the participants in this call were strung from southern Washington to Northern California through Oregon. And just before 11 a.m., someone in the Washington office said, "Did you guys feel that? It felt like an earthquake." And then there was a string of no's all down the call. And then, "Wait, we're feeling it here." And you could feel the earthquake coming through the phone call from Washington all the way to Northern California, which was, I'll never forget that. It was such an interesting experience. And it happened to be a 6.8 earthquake that had struck in Olympia, Washington, about 100 miles due north of Portland. And that quake was felt as far south as Salt Lake City, 1,000 miles away, and caused millions of dollars in damage. Fortunately, the injuries were mostly minor, and one woman did die of a heart attack when her husband couldn't reach emergency services due to jammed phone lines. So to recap, you had to convince people that the banks would survive Y2K. You had to institute policies and procedures and train your staff to pass the upcoming SAS 70 audit, which I believe you got the highest ranking possible and a trophy. You had to get the executives of these affiliate community banks to literally buy into your data and item processing services. You had to build a data center with extra costs for securing the servers to the walls in the unlikely event of a natural disaster. And you had to convince 70 people to pick up their roots in the small coastal town of Coos Bay and move 4 hours away to the largest city in Oregon. Have I forgotten anything?
No, I'm embarrassed by
That's
that.
20 balls.
Okay.
So looking back on that experience, what advice can you share about convincing other people to believe in something they've never seen? And how can leaders apply that thinking to where we are today and where we're going tomorrow?
Well, leaders deal with evolving situation every day, and no 2 days are the same. We have multiple tasks and priorities to pay attention to and give 100% to. We don't have the luxury of picking and choosing our problems in crisis. It comes at us from different sides. And the best thing is for us to make sure that we are mentally prepared and creating an organization with the right culture, right teams, and right resources, and right values, and shared, values and mission and vision that we stick behind when times comes, when tough time comes, because that's how you actually go back to. Because times like this, like today, it challenges your mission, vision, and values. How do you react as a leader to respond to the crisis that you don't know as to what tomorrow is going to bring? and how, what that's going to look like.
Mhm.
It's great to have plans, and those friends of ours from banks and credit unions that are on this conference call understand that they had to do pandemic planning for a long time, and all of this stuff that are going on in the market, they had to have a checkbox for it, including social distancing and washing your hands and everything else, and possibly maximum time off up to about maybe even more than 3 months or so, as to, cash planning and everything else that was going on.
Mhm.
But you cannot predict as to how employees going to handle this, how employee families going to handle this, what's the psychological impact of that on the organization, who's
Yeah.
stepping in as new leaders during the crisis, and who's actually hiding behind, information overload and
Yeah.
becoming, going into paralysis.
Yeah.
And for us is creating to have that culture, the ability to effectively manage and feel confident on the team that we built, on the culture that we built, and be able to effectively communicate, be authentic, have a trust level with the organization that they understand when we are saying something, they believe it,
Yeah.
and inspire people during the time that is actually very challenging for a lot to deal with this level of change,
Mhm.
and at the same time inspire creativity,
Yeah.
and innovation that will actually, when you look back, gives you the ability to see as to how many part of those creativity or new innovation can you adapt to
Mhm.
actually change your business model going forward for
Yeah.
the better. I
Yeah.
mean, this thing, the entire digital communication, we talked about it in the market forever. As organization are at the inflection point, they need to make a decision as to how do they replicate a human interaction digitally and take advantage of the digital community channels
Mhm. High
for
touch and
quite a
high
long
tech.
time. High
Yeah.
touch high tech that replicates high touch.
Yeah.
Because what happens if, people doesn't want to come to a branch or to a store?
Mhm.
And how do you leverage e-commerce, and not only a transactional e-commerce? Here's your, certain things that you can do,
Right.
but how do you interact?
Yeah.
How do you show your gratitude for somebody doing business with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you respond to somebody asking questions, and just kind of replicating an in-person, actually the paper that I have written in and was published about, a banking experience about, coffee lobby, and maybe we could share it with those who are interested.
Mhm.
But that's basically, we counted on people to walk into our store, in our business, and deal with us, and we had certain custom to go through.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden the whole thing's changed, and people, leaders who have the right mentality,
Yeah.
openness, flexibility, ability to step up and let others to step in as leaders,
Yeah.
share leadership, and trust, have a trust and confidence, and allow people to make decisions without authority,
Mhm.
and to
That's where
move the
the
business forward.
yeah.
you know do they have those type of cultures? That becomes very important.
Yeah, that's why embedding that culture, the mission, the vision, the purpose, the values, core values, so that you can let people, you can trust people to do what it is that they need to do and make decisions without going through you, because you've built a culture of trust. Getting back to our story,
Yeah, sorry, I just kind of went on.
no, it was great. I love it. I love it.
That's
Um,
me. Those who knows me know that this happens.
so shortly after you had Alliance Technology up and running, Security Bank Holding Company started looking for a buyer. Negotiations started with the CEO of Umpqua Bank Holding Company, which was a larger version of Security Bank Holding Company, and which also happened to be headquartered in Portland. So after the acquisition, the CEO of Umpqua Bank recruited me to work for him in Portland. And that's where you and I reconnected. And yada, yada, yada. By February of 2002, we bought a house together in San Diego and moved there. Your aging parents were living there with a lot of family members, and I was ready to get out of Oregon. But the next case study I want to ask you about was in March of 2009, when you were hired to lead XP2, which was headquartered in Simi Valley. For those of you who are following along, we still lived in San Diego County, which is just south of Orange County, which is just south of Los Angeles County, which is just south of Ventura County, which is where Simi Valley is. So 4 counties
240
spread.
miles away.
Yeah. So XP2 was the name of the business unit that you were hired to lead there. It was owned by Fiserv, like as in financial services, which was headquartered in Brookfield, Wisconsin, I believe.
Yes.
So quickly, can you explain Fiserv's business model before we get into what you found when you arrived at XP2?
Yeah. Well, Fiserv is a very well recognized company in the financial services industry. One of the top two largest organization globally, offering financial services to banks, credit unions, savings, and other organizations. It's a great company with about when I was there, about 2,300 I'm sorry, 23,000 employees in 5 continents. And the XP product was one of their core product for credit unions, specifically at that point targeted to medium to large organizations. Although we had organizations that were on the smaller side of the business in terms of assets, but not importance, because they all were very valuable clients to me. And we had about 10 or 11% of the market share in the market. And unfortunately, through the years, there was some challenges in the product, and being able to have referenceability in clients and client satisfaction, and at the same time being able to really leverage the brand of Fiserv the right way, and align to the brand that Fiserv was preaching in the market. So that's what the challenge was, that we needed to bring it to the level that it needed to be.
Yeah. So when you got to XP2, you started assessing your leadership team, collecting data about how the company was performing. And just some of the numbers were, you had a negative net promoter score when you walked in. Both the employee satisfaction and client satisfaction was not good. Clients reported poor response times, lack of staff experience. The satisfaction score of over 7 points below the minimal line of satisfaction for the clients. Little or no clients would even agree to give a positive reference for XP2. And even the building itself was structured in a way that encouraged silos among departments. So again, you dropped into something that needed multiple, fronts, needed help on multiple fronts. So basically you had to make changes that would touch every aspect of the organization. You had low employee morale, very unsatisfied clients, and a limited time to turn around a very small business unit that was in the orbit of this massive publicly traded company that had to meet quarterly returns. So where did you start, and what did you see in XP2 that gave you hope that it could succeed?
Well, that was a lot. So let's see. First of all, I'm so grateful for that opportunity, and I have some wonderful lifelong friends because of that opportunity, and so probably one or two of them are on the phone today, and so the opportunity was the fact that when I looked at the organization culture, it just needed to be dusted off a little bit. And the organization had morphed by not by planning, but by just simple exactly. And so it needed to be changed. It needed to be streamlined. The DNA of the company was absolutely perfect, and you could see the potential for the people. The leadership of the organization was hungry for the right leadership to put them on the spot and empower them to make the right decision. The employees were top line employees that simply needed a break and needed a champion to let them take the next step and show the world as to who they can be and what how they could perform. And all it takes is just a little bit, knowing the heart of the organization, and that to me was very important to once I realized that. And I only had a very short period of time because yes, the financial performance was not where it needed to be, and I had a mandate to grow the business as quickly and as fast as possible. But I wasn't gonna take a hacksaw and go through the organization and try to find money. It was more about how do we perform our roles and responsibilities the right way,
Yeah.
satisfy our clients and make them to be all referenceable, and then bring the organization a win for all
Wow.
of us.
I like
And
that.
that's how the approach was.
I like that idea of performing your way out, of the whole. But I do remember that what you described at the time as the worst day of your professional career. Sorry to keep bringing these, uh, bringing these up, but when you had to let go of, I don't know, probably dozens of employees at one time under pressure to help Fiserv make its quarterly numbers. I may be misstating that a little bit, so feel free to correct me. But first, you had to right size the organization. It was a day in which you hadn't been there for a very long time. You hadn't built strong, deep relationships with many of the people that you had to let go that day, but you insisted on personally meeting with each one of them at a time on that day in back-to-back meetings. And I remember what a tough day it was for you, and you having to step outside from time to time and just take a walk and gather yourself. So why did you put yourself through that excruciating day when you could have delegated most of the exit interviews to other people?
Wow. So first of all, as a leader, you cannot be a victim. You make decisions and you live by it, and you want to make sure those decisions are sound, and you have trust in your decision making, in your team, in the conclusion that you have arrived, and you are decisive in the way you handle things.
Yeah.
So by no means this was something that Fiserv made me do. It's something that I had to do to make sure that we become a lean and mean organization that could run a marathon at a very fast pace.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was one part of it. As difficult as it was, I had to make those tough decisions, and we all have to do that at crisis time. Sometimes it's good to have the luxury of making decision earlier ahead of time, so you could make tough decision in good time and good decision in bad times. But at that time, at that type of situation, you're kind of put on the spot, and so I had to make some tough decisions. I trusted the leadership, I trusted the organization, and I trusted that we were cutting a little bit deeper than what I liked, but it was necessary to make.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time communicating that back to the employees, and allowing the leadership team to take charge and be able to effectively communicate as well, and being able to actually partner with them and not go hide somewhere.
Yeah.
And deal with the decision that I have made as a leader of the organization, and owning it, and at the same time making commitment to the rest of the team that we will bring every one of them back when we get the opportunity, when we perform, and that's worth to be part of this organization, and that steps up. We're
Yeah.
going to bring him, and we it was, to me, it was necessary for people to see me as a leader, in the just in the front line with them.
Yeah.
And for those who whose job was affected, also to see me talking with them and not being in some hiding or something, and thanking them for all of the day I've done. And just it's matter of time and matter of situation, not necessarily performance or anything.
Yeah.
And none of those were personal. And
Yeah.
I love every one of them, and I respect every one of them for everything that they had done.
Yeah.
And but yet that's what people had to see, and not only people had to see, I had to see that for myself
Yeah.
in order for me to be able to do that effectively.
I really like how you, because there are leaders today who are having to, to let people go, whether on furlough or whatever it is that they're calling it. I think there's a certain amount of survival guilt that happens, especially in a fairly small community where these people have worked together for a long time. Their kids might maybe play soccer together on the weekends, and they go to church together, and so I do think that there's a certain amount of survival guilt. So I like what you said about, let's perform our way out of this and bring our fallen soldiers back. And the fact that you did was really outstanding. You had to keep the people who remained from losing trust and just thinking, oh, this is going to be a wave of layoffs and I'm next. And it's really hard to keep people focused when they're not sure about their own personal future, worried about their friends and colleagues, and boost their morale and prepare them to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think this is again, all of those experiences could relate to what's going on today.
Yeah.
And there are organizations that are furloughing and laying off people today just because their stakeholders in their current situation in dealing with this crisis really cannot allow organization to be overloaded as far as the resources goes. So they might have to make their organization to be lean and rethink their structure, rethink their reporting structure, rethink their, how flat they want the organization to be to effectively expedite decision-making process, and going from a more traditional hierarchy of reporting, now having a completely different environment that none of those applies anymore.
Yeah.
And including your performance and how you are effectively evaluating somebody as to how they are performing their jobs being working from home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that all comes into play as to, do you really have the right organization, the right leadership, and the solution that you're looking for that fits, and the flexibility that fits the demand of the time.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, can you make sure that you are effectively communicating with the organization, those that are there, as to you're authentic, you're upfront, and they understand that here are the plans that we have on the human resources. Here is who's affected and here's who's not. Here is our plan as to how we are dealing with it. And here's our long-term plan, because you cannot sacrifice your long-term plan just because you're responding to a short-term objective. Here's what short-term we have to do to survive and make sure all stakeholders are happy. And then on the long run, here's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
And people have to see that vision and buy into that
Yeah.
vision and champion it for you.
Yeah. Thank you. So for those of you who are playing along at home, you were a rising star at Fiserv and were given more and more business units to lead. I had been working as the Director of Strategic and Operational Planning for 6.5 years at a company here in San Diego that we grew from $10 million to $200 million in revenue. I was heavily invested in my job. That company that I worked for managed to escape the layoffs from the 2008 recession, but not the 2013 government shutdown and sequestration. So on Monday, January 14th, 2013, I was laid off. Now, you were out of town. I didn't call you or text you that day because you were in Corvallis, Oregon at the time. You were getting ready to walk employees and clients through a major announcement of one of the largest acquisitions in the history of Fiserv at the time. I think close to $1 billion acquisition. So you called me late on Monday night. I could hear the exhaustion in your voice. You'd been working with your team hard on the communication plans and the rollout that was going to happen first thing Tuesday morning. So when you asked me, how was your day? I said, everything's fine. Get some rest. I'll talk to you tomorrow. So at 8:30 a.m. The next day, we got a group text from a family member that your oldest sister had just passed away from cancer. And so you called me about 20 minutes later with tears in your eyes or voice and telling me that you were booking a flight to DC where your sister lived, and you asked me to join you there at the end of the week whenever I could get away from work and we could make funeral plans together. And so I had to interrupt you in the middle of all this and say, I have something to tell you. I was let go yesterday. And I didn't want to pile that extra news on your plate, but I had to tell you sometime. And so in that moment, you had to deal with a lot of competing major priorities coming at you from multiple places. The handling of the business announcement had to be delegated. You were hit by the wave of loss of your oldest sibling. You had to make immediate travel plans. Your wife just told you that she'd lost a job that she loved after 6.5 years. And on the phone call in that moment, you said to me, use this opportunity as a springboard. Start your own company and teach others what you learned about culture and performance. So I've always been awestruck by your ability to focus enough in that moment to pull those words of advice out of the air. We'd never discussed anything about me starting a company before. You could easily have said that you're sorry and can we talk about it later, which would have been just fine with me. Because I knew you had so much to deal with personally and professionally, but instead, you focused your attention on me with just 2 sentences that planted the seed that launched this company, Center for Executive Excellence, over 7 years ago. So today's leaders are in the age of, quote unquote, what else could possibly go wrong? Our employees and our families are looking to us to focus and paint a vision for what's next, even though we're going through our own personal trials at the same time. So I'm going to word this question in the way I'm going to word it. You answer it however you want to answer it. But what well did you tap into to be there for others as a guide while dealing with your own deeply personal challenges? And how can leaders apply that to what we're going through today?
So there was a lot going on that day. I remember that day because we were just getting ready to make the announcement, especially for those client of ours that had purchased a product called Acumen at that time. And I had about 300 people in the US that was working on that product. And we just acquired a company called Open Solutions. And for me to not only talk to the clients to tell them that we are merging the 2 products together and your Acumen is going away and the feature of that is going to be built into the Open Solutions and you can go that direction, which was not a very, those who are our credit unions understand that what that means and how difficult of a conversation that could possibly be with a CEO who put their entire career and reputation on the line to make that type of decision and the things that we had to deal with. But at the same time, there was a lot of employees, the 300 employees that didn't know now what for me.
And that's why you were in Corvallis, because
that's why I was there, and not only to make the announcement, but make sure that I'm there for them and available for them, and listen to them, and make sure that you know we continue that trusted relationship that we had, and based on the culture that we were promoting. And so I was there, and yes, my sister, who was, briefly was suffering from cancer. She passed away that morning, and I was in the middle of the announcement, actually standing in front of the podium, addressing the employees when the text came, and I look at the text, and so I had to continue on, and then
Didn't know that.
jump from there and go and have some conversation with some of the clients. Meanwhile, then your news, and I'm going like, is there anything else that you can pile on?
This is a reference to one of our favorite comedies, My Cousin Vinny. So sorry, it's an internal joke.
So anyway, the thing of it is, again, as I mentioned earlier, uh, as leaders, we can't choose our problems. As leaders, we cannot choose our challenges. And we understand that part of our job is to be there and be present for people who need us. And especially the people that we care about and we love and so much. And so, and not only to just kind of shove things out and put it to tomorrow, because as they say, tomorrow is promised to no one.
Yeah.
How about dealing with it right now and at the present moment, but not be evolved and hide behind your own problems and challenges and everything else, but actually be there and listen and participate and be authentic in that interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to hear you out and understand your fears and understand the challenges and changes that you're going through
Mm-hmm.
it was real for you, and it's real for me, and it affects our lives. And I always knew that you had it in you, and you were better than just working for an organization who I did not very much believe in, if you recall. But
Yeah.
the things that drove you had a bigger audience and bigger impact
Yeah.
to make the world a better place, and
Oh,
be comfortable and be proud of what you accomplish. I knew you had that in you, so it was very obvious. Usually leaders don't have all the answers, but they are very much open to getting feedback from everybody else.
yeah.
But I got lucky that day and that time that I had some respond to you the right way, and I'm glad it worked out.
You got lucky. Well, I got lucky too. Thank you. All right, Miss Danielle, how are we doing on time? Do we have any other questions?
We actually don't have any questions right now, but if anyone would like to submit questions through your little Q&A chat, we've got 10 minutes, so it'd be a great time to do so. If not, that's okay, but I think if you have another question, we'll give people a chance. It looks like we got let's see here. Did I just get a question? Oh, we do have a question. We have actually a question from Bill. He raised his hand.
Yes.
He would like to talk, so I'm going to put him on if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yes. Hi, Bill.
All right. Hang on, Bill. Okay. Bill, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, and good to hear you.
Yeah, thank
Good to
you,
hear your
Janelle.
voice.
Hi, Sheri and Naseer. Thank
Hi.
you for the opportunity to zoom into your program today. And I congratulate you on the relevance and timeliness of your topic and your presentation. You make a great presentation team together, by the way.
Thanks.
And it's so impressive that you're able to convey your message through your personal experiences. Really makes it much more significant and meaningful. And Naseer, I appreciate your reference to the worst day of your life. I maybe the second worst day of your life is when you called on me in my office. I was an XP2 client, very unhappy client. But what I want to say is that with XP2 specifically, but with your entire career, you have the ability to recognize problems and issues and opportunities. You have the courage to acknowledge them, and then the commitment to say, you know, we're going to fix things for our employees, for our clients. We're going to make things better. And you made that commitment to me, and you delivered. And you know, it's been a respect and a friendship all those many years. So just wanted to put that into the mix for you.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. And for those of you who, for some reason, don't know Bill, because Bill, everybody should know him. And he is a great leader, a great mentor, and a great friend. That you know, obviously our starting point was really bumpy, because I had to call him and apologize for things that I hadn't done, but you know, asking him for patience and support as I'm about to execute new things. But he has been nothing but a great support and a great ally, and part of my advisory board when I was running XP2, and such a wonderful man to get to know, and get to know his family.
Mhm.
And again, those are some of the lasting, you know, friendship that we built as a result of this, because none of them was fake and made up. All of this were authentic
Mhm.
and heartfelt. So, Bill, thank you so much for your comment.
Absolutely. One upon.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
sorry about that, Bill. Come on back.
He's muted, looks like.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We just wanted to say thank you again, and great to see you.
I didn't want to pop for
Good
us.
luck.
Hi
Yeah.
to Wanapa. Give our best to Wanapa.
I see
Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Well, we've got 8 minutes. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. I do want to let people know if any questions come up in the meantime, please email us at info@executiveexcellence.com. That's info@executiveexcellence.com. That's smothered on our website too, so you can go there if you forget. This was really fun for me, Naseer and Sheri. I personally, I respect both of you, but I just really enjoyed hearing more about these stories and the richness of your experience as a millennial. As I call it, an elder millennial. I really appreciated just the wisdom you shared, and particularly what you had to say about being authentic. In my generation especially, and maybe just, I don't want to speak for my generation, but for me, you can sniff it out. You can sniff out when people are being fake. And I just appreciate that you were saying being upfront and communicating with people and being authentic. I mean, that really shows that you care. And I can usually tell when someone cares about me, and particularly a leader. And so I just wanted to thank you for that. There was a lot of nuggets of wisdom, but that one really stood out to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all who are still online for joining us today. This is really an opportunity for you to show up and show your people who you are. One of the things we talked about, Sheri and I, over the weeks is that 5 years from now, people are going to remember what you said and did as leaders during this time over the meetings and announcements you gave during when times when were more normal. So don't just sit back, lead. And as a reminder, we'll be sending out today's recording by tomorrow morning, so be on the lookout for that. And we're excited to announce the date and speaker for our next webinar happening this month. So stay tuned, we'll keep it a surprise until that email goes out. But we hope you can join us for that. But until then, be safe, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Naseer, so much for giving us your time and your stories and your wisdom today. And thank you, Sheri, as well.
Thank you, Danielle. Thanks for putting all this together. You do such a great job, and you make it easy for Naseer and I just have a conversation when we know you've got all the technology running in the background. So thank you so much.
Happy to. It was fun.
Thank you all as well. Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.